Welcome to Adventures in Collecting with Christopher Richards. I'm Mindy Towsley. I'm the Executive Director of the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve. The mission of the archives is to collect representative bodies of work by Ohio's visual artists, and we make them available to the public through exhibitions and through programming just like this one. We do have a website, www.artistarchives.org, and we have a physical location for those of you who have never heard of us before. We're located in University Circle, very close to the western wall of the Lakeview Cemetery. So our guests tonight are Christopher Richards. I would also like to introduce everyone to Kelly Pontoni, who's our collections registrar. She's going to be manning the chat for us. And also Megan Elves, our manager of marketing and programming. And Megan's going to introduce Christopher in just a moment. So before I turn the program over to them, I would like to thank our funders: the Bernice and David Davis Art Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the Gunn Foundation, the Zufall Foundation, Ohio Arts Council, and Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, which represents the people of Cuyahoga County in Ohio. I'm just going to take one more minute to talk about a couple of things that are happening at the archives. Right now we have an exhibition up called The Wild Ride, paintings of Ken Nevedomi. He is an archived artist, so this is his inaugural exhibition as an archived artist, kind of a mini retrospective, and it is on view in our galleries through Saturday, August 7th. We are open to the public from Wednesday through Saturday, Wednesday through Friday from 10 to 4, and Saturday from 12 to 4. So please feel free to visit us. If you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. Our staff is fully vaccinated, and we are still following all of the cleaning things that we did during the pandemic. So please come and visit us. We'd love to have you. I'd also just like to mention that we have going on a summer board fundraising effort. This is primarily through our website and through our Facebook page. And our board has taken on a challenge to do some really kind of wild stunts, and we're asking people to donate to support them. So far we've had Stuart Pearl, who has never baked a thing in his life, who made a cake in the shape of a camera, and it was pretty fantastic. And Lee Heinen, who dyed her hair blue for 4th of July, and Rin Clark, who has supported us through an iPhone workshop, which was amazing. So coming up for the rest of the summer, we've got John Sargent, and I'm not quite sure what John is doing. I think he settled on doing specialized critiques for artists, like personal critiques. And John is an amazing landscape and portrait painter whose works are shown nationally. So this is a pretty special thing. For myself, I'm going to be publicizing some stupid cat tricks using my family of half dozen cats in my house, and you can check that out on my website, which is www.mindytowsley.com, and you'll see a little blurb up there for Cat Tricks 21 Cat Wonderland. And so that'll start a couple of weeks. Check my Facebook page, check the archives Facebook page for upcoming things like that. We also have coming up in August a huge exhibition called Converge. It's an exhibition of the LGBTQ plus community, and it is not only in the archives gallery space, but it will be at Metro Health's gallery space. It will be at the LGBT Center of Cleveland, which is in the Gordon Square neighborhood. It will be at Lake Erie Community College. And it also is at Judson Manor right now. The work at Judson Manor is from the collection of the archives. It's going to be an amazing show. There's going to be lots of programming to go with it, presented by all the different venues. And in fact, coming up, I believe it will be July 30th, the LGBT Center will be promoting a curator's talk and an artist talk. So please, again, check our website and our Facebook page for more information on that. And you might want to check the LGBT Center's page too. So I think that's it for me. So I'm now going to turn it over to Megan Elves.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to, I'm just making sure that there we go, my speaker view. Can everyone see me okay? Large speaker? Okay, good. So welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for coming. This is an awesome one. We're really passionate about the idea that art collecting is not just something for the rich and the privileged, that art collecting is for anyone who loves art. And Christopher is a perfect example of that. Before we get into it, I know you guys are really familiar with Zoom. So I wanted to make sure to give you a moment to just kind of let you know about stuff that's going to be pertinent for the program. What we are going to do is, so there's the chat, which is your normal function, represented by the little chat bubble. And then there's also the Q&A. So Q&A is going to be really the important one for this one. Go ahead and put questions in there that you want Christopher to answer, and we will ask them at the end. Or when Q&A is actually up, you have another option, which is that I'll give you the cue and you guys can raise your hands. And that would allow us to actually call on you. You'll be able to have audio and you can ask the question out loud. We won't be able to see you, so you can still be in your bunny slippers, but we'll be able to do it that way. Outside of that, if you have any problems during the presentation, go ahead and raise your hand. Kelly Pontoni will be working the chat and be able to help you there. Yeah, then without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Christopher, but if there's any Zoom questions, let me know. So about Christopher. So Christopher L. Richards has been working in the fine arts for over 10 years. Formerly the curator of Art Neo, the Museum of Northeast Ohio Art, where he's very well known there, Richards continues to work on independent projects. He's worked for galleries, auction houses, publications, and nonprofits, including Cam Journal. You've probably read his amazing articles there. He's also worked for Rachel Davis Arts and Wolf's Gallery, where he's also working right now. We have Nevedomi, who's the show that's up currently at the archive, is represented by Wolf's as well. So Christopher is very versed there. He specializes in regional art of the 20th century and has published essays and catalogs on the pop portraits of Phyllis Sloan, who is an archived artist, post-painterly abstraction in Northeast Ohio, and the abstract expressionist paintings of James Johnson. So that is Christopher. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and pop him over. So Christopher, take it away whenever you're ready.
Sure, thank you. Let me get my screen sharing on. Beginning. All right, is everything looking okay? Great.
Yes.
So first, I want to thank you, Megan, as well as Mindy and Kelly, the volunteers at the archives and the board of the Artist Archives of Western Reserve for inviting me to share my art collection and a tour of my home with you all tonight. Art collecting is something that I'm really passionate about. I didn't ever think I could be an art collector. I didn't think I had the budget for it. But as you will see, I've amassed quite a collection just by sheer tenacity and luck. A warning for some people that may have motion sickness. There are some moving videos that are from a handheld camera, so you may want to caution viewing those. Primarily, I got my interest in collecting art through a passion for mid-century modern art and design. And I began studying that after I finished my bachelor's degree in 2003. So a lot of the things that I collected were things from my first apartment and my first home. And I always thought, why buy something new if there's perfectly good used wares out there and for affordable prices? And mid-century modern was not yet as collectible as it is today, so it was readily available in thrift stores and very affordable. I was also really interested in plastics, so I began, focusing on melamine, and I would buy random melamine from garage sales and whatnot. But through research, I came upon an artist named Joan Lunt, who happened to be a Shaker Heights artist. And she created all these dinnerware designs for Brook Park International Molded Plastics in the 1950s. One of them, shown here, titled Modern Design, won a Good Design Award from MoMA. I have to give credit to my ex, actually, for introducing me to Victor Schreckengast and encouraging me to learn more about Cleveland art. The idea he thought I would like was that Schreckengost designed dinnerware as well, and it really fit into my passion for collecting objects that could be used for everyday life. And Schreckengost really, he put a lot of attention to detail into everything that he did, and even in their advertising, they describe it as each piece is a conversation piece. So the idea is that everyday objects are also works of art, and you can live with them, and you can grow with them, and you can use them. I ended up collecting so much Schreckengost that I now have what I like to consider a Schrecken box. So it's got like just tons and tons of Schreckengost dinnerware. But he opened up the entire world of Cleveland art, because then I started learning about the fine arts and the early 20th century Cleveland School artists. And particularly, like, I learned about the Cocoon Club, which really piqued my interest. So I ended up leaving a design job and became a photographer for a local auction house. And after a year there, I learned that a lot of times when works of art go to auction, the value is not quite what you would pay for at a fine art gallery. It became a little bit more of an approachable way to have access to the art and to bring them into my home. After leaving that auction house, I decided to get my master's in art history from Kent State, and I began volunteering with the Cleveland Artists Foundation, which is now Art Neo, the Museum of Northeast Ohio Art and Design. And there I discovered the works of Ken Nevadomi and Ed Michkowski. And they're very, very different, but they both really captured my imagination. So much so that I ended up writing my thesis on Michkowski's work. But you might not think that there's very much in common between these two pieces. One is very figural and is portraying acts of violence. The other is very non-objective and flat. However, they both have similar uses of gradients to show a sense of depth of space. So I like to find where things have commonalities and pair them together. But having experienced and being exposed to some of these artists, I was like, I really would like to start collecting them. And that I started thinking like, well, what is a collection? As I first started purchasing art, I was just buying what I liked. I wasn't quite paying attention to what it was, more so who it was. And was I aware of them? And could I research them? But when you're collecting art and starting a real serious collection, you want to think of a couple things. One would be like, how does what you're collecting, how do all of those individual pieces fit together to give us a better understanding of a period of time, an artist's body of work, or a subject matter? And I found myself really kind of drawn to geometric abstraction and op art, but I also really found interest in abstract expressionism and pop art. So you can really pick a variety of movements or styles, periods, or artists, and find ways to tie them all together. And I hope that this presentation will show you that that's really actually a very possible thing to do. I have been collecting now for about 12 years, and I have miraculously accumulated over 275 pieces. But I'd initially, because I'm on a budget, would only collect works that were available for under $100. Occasionally I would splurge from time to time. You never know when you're going to see something that you might not come across again. But still, even today, I try to stay below $200 on any purchase of art. And most pieces I try to find between 30 and 60. So that really gives you an idea of like how I go about trying to accumulate a collection and build it on a budget. Like those are the numbers that I'm working with. And so I collect what I find, because finding art at those prices is really difficult. But I'm also very focused, and I choose very purposefully what I like to collect. So really, the idea of understanding a topic and focusing on what you like brought me to collecting works from the 70s and the 80s. As much as I was really fascinated by 1950s artwork, the 70s and the 80s I found by working through the auction industry that you could buy a lot of really nice pieces for very little at the time that I started, because people were still paying attention to early 20th century Cleveland art as well as the mid-century. 70s and 80s, people tended not to pay too much attention to, and I was able to pick up quite a bit of pieces at the very beginning. So now I would like to welcome you into my home. The first room we're going to look at is the living room, and you'll notice right away that my kitten Chrissy is sitting down there welcoming you. There is a theme to the living room. You may also notice that there are mobiles throughout the house. There's a couple in the dining room. There's one in the corner over here. Those were created by my partner, Ryan Raymer. The room itself is really themed on the figure, even though there are still some non-objective abstract works. But when we started putting artwork in this room, we noticed that the faces were obscured in a lot of them. And once we figured that out, that that was starting to be a theme, we purposefully chose to have works with obscured faces. And it's really anchored by the Nivedomi, which is fascinatingly hung over a window because I ran out of wall space. It's the only place that it could go. And sometimes you have to sacrifice a window for art. So Nivedomi, as I had said, became one of my favorites once I started volunteering with Art Neo. And I tried multiple times to purchase one of his works from auction, but kept getting outbid, even though the prices were actually rather low. They were still beyond my reach at the time. But eventually I was able to purchase several, and it took many attempts, but now I can enjoy them. His work is often violent, especially the early work, and also sexual in nature. What I really enjoy about his work is that it's oftentimes difficult to look at. He makes the viewer feel uncomfortable, forces them to be a witness to the scene that he's depicting, and it kind of makes you feel like you're forced to be a voyeur. It's really a bizarre, odd way to approach having to look at a painting, is trying to decode what he's trying to say. And by obscuring her face, you really can't tell, aside from the shock of being seen and her trying to cover herself, you don't know what's going on. Like, is this a stranger or is this someone attacking her? You don't know. And I think that's part of what Nivedomi really wanted to express, is you can't quite tell what's going on in a lot of his paintings. I'm going to give also some light background information on the artists that I'm featuring, but primarily I want you to notice that I've included the dates that they were in the May show. I know there was recently an archives program on the May show, and I have to say that even though the May show is no longer around, it was a way for a lot of regional artists to get their work in front of the public eye at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And while that's not happening anymore, the documentation still exists. And it is extremely valuable if you're wanting to learn more about Cleveland art and learn to see how artists may have developed over the years, because many of them, as you can see with Nivedomi, participated in multiple years. And if you have a Cleveland Public Library card, you have access to JSTOR, which is a database, and you can look up the May show and download every single catalog as a PDF. And that is how I taught myself what artists that I was interested in and what to look for when I was out trying to find pieces out in the wild. it's so valuable that I still actually have the PDFs on my phone and will scroll through them regularly just to refresh my memory, and keep certain.
I think we have a slight Zoom glitch real quick, so we're just going to give that a moment to resolve. There we go. All right, can Minnie and Kelly give me a confirmation there? Is Christopher glitched?
Yeah, he's off.
Okay. Let's give it just a second. So we do have, so yay, the fun nature of Zoom. We have that backed up and everything, but sometimes all it takes is the connection gets popped off and then they're able to log back on, no worries. So that was a nice shout out to the May Show program though. And I had no idea you could get those PDFs. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, that was great. You know, that was something that was not brought out during the program.
Am I back?
The value of the history. Oh, you're back. Yay.
Oh, good. How long was I gone?
Not long.
Not long.
Okay.
A minute, and we were talking about the May Show. So absolutely, go ahead, jump back in whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I was still talking. I just finished the May show.
Oh, correct. Yeah, that's exactly what
Okay.
it is. So if you start your screen share from there, and we'll take it up.
Sure. Hold on. I guess I have to exit screen share.
Yeah, go ahead and try that. And then again, thanks for everyone. That's the exciting part about Zoom.
Yeah. Right.
You can tell we're used to this. Just like, yep, we know this one. We know this game. Awesome. We're seeing the perfect.
I'm back.
You're back. Awesome.
All right. Yeah. So like,
Welcome
I
back.
guess I'll start over with Vivian Abrams. I'm not sure if you got any of that, but
Good place to start.
I was really fascinated by her use of materials with these pieces. She was actually really popular in the 1970s in Cleveland, but not so well known in the area today, and I'm hoping to change that. But her use of materials is that she had these wood structures that you would normally think of as stretcher bars, and she painted those, but she would then insert starched canvas and she'd leave those unpainted. So it's kind of like subverting the idea that the canvas is what you paint. But the pieces also have they have this really nice central beams that relate to the outer wings of the works. So you can see that the wings kind of step down. And if you were to see that directly from the side, it matches the interior beams measurements. So there's this idea of the dimensionality, like she messes with your visual perception that way. But she also, with these beams, connects the left side to the right side. And that is an exploration of the bicameral structure of the brain. So there's a lot of different aspects to her work that makes it very complex, and actually very interesting to think about and study and just live with and look at. We're going to go ahead and then move into the dining room. And you'll notice that we have a lot of plants throughout the house. And we really thought that the artwork in the dining room should reflect that. So we have several still lifes. There's Susan Fiore and Marion Bryson. But we also have, there's also a little tabletop Eileen Dorsey forest scene by the Cowan Pottery Lamp. We also wanted to include some like kind of man-made aspect of it. So you've got a Todd Leach ceramic that kind of has that idea of like ruins or maybe concrete structure for construction. And then you have like Michkowski's Crane series painting that is primarily about the way construction cranes were moving in downtown Cleveland and how the different beams changed perception, and really this wild activity to his ideas. Back to looking at nature is a Mark Keffer piece that I was able to purchase from the artist. And it is actually referencing a William Sommer painting from the early 20th century, and it's also a tree. So it's got this whole idea of being a natural element, but it's abstracted. On the bar, you'll see some David Batts ceramics and a William Ward handkerchief. And I've got a few Jake Kelly smoke drawings of cats. But really, I think what ties the entire room together is this Gary Crawford. It's a large experimental piece that has the strong vertical lines like the Ed Michkowski, but contains the foliage that ties it again to the other side of the room with the Susan Fiore. In my cabinets, the built-ins is where I keep most of the 3D objects that I collect. You can see some of the Victor Schreckengoss dinnerware. I've got a Waylon Gregory bird from the 1950s. Again, from about the 1950s, 1960s are the Lichka decanter and cups. There's Gerta Hacker enamel bowl in the back with a Doris Hall little enamel in front of it. And I really like to point out the Angelica Pozzo and the Penny Rakoff tile of the West Side Market all the way in the back. I have a small collection of those that I was able to pick up at thrift stores again. It's my best friend. Is how you find things for really good prices. And then there's also a Patty Schneider bowl. And the dining room really is a kind of more eclectic than the other rooms because the 3D objects don't quite all fit together with certain themes. The Michkowski was a lot of fun to find. It was rather random. I was doing thesis research and happened upon this image through a Google image search and saw that it was from a gallery in California and couldn't quite believe the price. So I thought it might be too good to be true, and thought, well, I'll inquire about it, and sent an email, but didn't hear back. So I ended up just buying it, hoping that it was real, and that maybe someone didn't know what they had, or maybe someone just needed to move it really quickly. But the gallery ended up calling me the next day and confirming that I got a really good deal on the piece for the price that it was listed at, because it was mispriced. And that happens sometimes. You can get really great artwork that people put the wrong price on. But they went back and forth with the consignor, and they finally decided they would indeed honor the sale. So I emailed Ed and I told him I was really excited to finally add one of his pieces to my collection. And he turned to me and he said, "Hey, I thought that was you. So I'm really happy you have this piece." And he ended up mailing it to me directly from his studio, but he hadn't signed or dated it prior. And so he actually dated it 1970, even though the piece is probably from 1985. I don't know what this will do to the value of the piece, but I really don't care because it is a cornerstone piece for my collection. But it is also a good point to all of you artists out there. Please date your works. It helps not only collectors, but also art historians identify what period the work was done, and also verifies authenticity. And then let's see here. The Gary Crawford, I want to point out again because of the strong vertical lines and how it connects to the Michkowski in the room, but also because this is a really interesting piece done in the probably early 80s, mid 80s, and it uses new technologies. It was done, right around when color Xerox technology was becoming a little more advanced and more available to everyday people for normal office use and etc. And what she did is she made these giant fabric constructions and inserted bits of plants and foliage, and then Xeroxed them piece by piece, section by section, and then combined each sheet to create the larger image. And I really enjoyed that, this is a non-traditional art material and a new technology, but she was able to capture these really wonderful still lifes in a new type of photography. So I want to jump down to the basement real quick because it also kind of defines how I think about the figure in art and what you'll see throughout the rest of the house as well. It's also where I have the third Nevedomi that I purchased, and I got this directly from the Erdelak collection. The other two I purchased from auction, but the idea of knowing where the pieces come from, that each of the Nevedomis came from the Erdelak collection, really adds to knowing the provenance of the artwork and the importance. And Erdelak, who you hopefully know or may not be familiar with, was a very important Cleveland art collector, and he pretty much helped a number of artists, including Nevedomi, where he pretty much bought an entire show of Nevedomi's work. And he also helped fund Shirley Ailey Campbell's travels to do her studies for her motorcycle series, or a number of other large bodies of work that Shirley Ailey Campbell created. So having a collector like that is incredibly important, and it's also kind of encouraging that hopefully maybe one day I will be able to support artists the way he did. But it also helps collectors like myself, because when a collector passes away, their estate can do a number of things. It can be donated to museums, as some of the works from the Erdelak collection have been, but they also end up going onto the secondary market. And that is where I find a lot of work that I end up purchasing. So it really helps to know where things come from, and it's just a lot of fun to put together the history of the paintings. The basement, though, continues to explore the human figure, and through Nevedomi's work, you can see that there is an overt sexuality. And I really don't believe that this is objectification, but rather an embracing the pleasures of the flesh. I really think that this is him exploring his own sexuality and the sexuality of others. Similarly, there's an artist, Victor Cord, who spent some time in Cleveland. He originated as an abstract expressionist, but then turned into a pop artist. And this print that's Untitled from 1967 really, I think, captures this idea that sexuality is a game, that there's a sport to play, that there's this idea that we're also kind of chained to our passions and our desires. There's this little bit of bondage in S&M that's kind of connotated through this piece. But that contrasts a lot with another piece I have in the basement that's figurative, and that's by Mary Spain. And with Mary Spain's piece, the women here are kind of withdrawn. The woman in blue is averting her gaze from the viewer, and she's closing herself off with her crossed hands, whereas the woman in red is trying to cover herself, but is directly confronting the viewer with her gaze. I think this really illustrates how there's different components to how you can view a figure in art, and how you can see how they interact with sensuality or their psychological makeup of different types of pleasure or protectiveness or modesty versus exhibitionism. We're going to go up to the second floor now, and first I wanted to take a stop in the stairwell and the hallway. because these places, they really bring home the idea that you can create your own narrative with your art collection um, through meaningful groupings. And the stairwell has 3 works by William Ward and 3 works by William Radwick and a still life by Marion Bryson. And I find that they are a reflection of the human relationship with nature. You've got the William Wards, which are abstract expressionist stain paintings, and they're based off of the raw emotion that he felt and saw when he traveled to the Southwest in Mexico with the landscapes and the sunrises and sunsets. There's a lot of passion in wanting to express those times of day and those places and enjoy them and celebrate them. On contrast is Radwick's manicured, very controlled green grasses, these panels that are made up and composed of the grass that you would find and use at hobby stores for model railroad sets. And that really kind of brings connotations to me of like astroturf or mowing your lawn and keeping it really well kept. And that ties into the Marion Bryson, where you're really taking the idea of bringing nature into your home. You're going out and you're clipping it, you're bringing it in to enjoy, but it's only fleeting. Like it'll end up decaying and you have to end up throwing it away. So I really feel like these 3 types of pieces really portray how we react and interact with nature. At the top of the stairs, I have multiple pieces that we created a narrative for, and it's more about like the chemical reactions. There's the Victor Cord print that is in the lower right, where he's like making some sort of concoction. And I really thought that the Yvonne Bacale and the David Masters and Eugenie Torgensen pieces kind of illustrated like those chemical reactions going on, like more concrete with the bottom piece and a little bit more atmospheric, and then with the Torgensen it just kind of evaporates into the air. But you know, this is not the artist's intent. Like none of these artists really intended these pieces to be read that way. That is just purely our own way of enjoying the work and creating our own narratives for them. In the bathroom, we kind of really wanted to create a spa-like feel and the idea of bathing, as well as getting ready for a day or just winding down. So there's a lot of nude figures in the bathroom. And I want to focus on the Phyllis Seltzer because I really think the Phyllis Seltzer piece is a strong work, and her early work had a really feminist bent to it. And you can see here with Green Flame that the female figure being nude looks like she's a little startled or shocked. So it gives the impression that someone walked in on her, and she's covering herself with a mirror. So she's diverting the male gaze with the mirror. However, the gaze is like the mirror is reflecting the feet, and feet are oftentimes fetishized. It's another erogenous zone. So she's kind of defeating the purpose a little bit there. But paired with this car, this really like sensual car with these curvilinear shapes on it, I really feel like she's giving a commentary on how men can see women as objects to possess, like they see cars as objects to possess. Even in the piece that was in the photograph of her that was called Women's Flight, she's still like having a feminist message going through it, with the woman in this old-time fashioned like pedal plane type thing, the early stages of flight, and she's saying that women are just they're right there with the men. We're going to go across the hall now into the office, and the office is what I like to call the op and pop room. It's primarily geometric abstraction. You can see some Michkowski, some Pearson, there's Jenna Omates and Stanchek. And it's really interesting because when we moved into the house, this room was a teenage girl's room. And you can notice that there's a lot of markings on the walls. And originally we thought we would paint over them, but we also wanted to get art on the walls. So we ended up hanging, more lively colored works, some more softer works. And we turned out that this room really gravitated towards op and pop. And the writings that are on the wall actually kind of give it a little bit more emphasis. They work really well with the pieces. So just by happenstance, we have this fun decoration on the wall that enhances the art experience of the room. The Michkowski is one of my more recent acquisitions. I was also finding this one via chance online. I was Googling Anaskevich prints. I had several Anaskevich prints in the past, and I really enjoyed them, but ended up having to sell them so I could make payments on student loans. And that's another thing as a collector, is you shouldn't be afraid to sell artwork from your collection. Sometimes you outgrow a piece, or sometimes a piece just no longer works with the other pieces that you are purchasing. Or you may also, like myself, find yourself in a time where you need to pay bills, and it's a good way to accommodate for that. But this one, I was really searching for Anaskevich prints, and decided I found this website. I was going to, on a whim, search Michkowski, and this came up. So I bought it, and then the next day, I got a text from Vivian Abrams Collins, who saw our work earlier in this presentation. And she told me she was really excited that I was the one that purchased it, and that got us starting to talk about future projects as well. But it adds the provenance. Like, I know now that she got this directly from Ed, and through some further research, I discovered that it was also included in his 1974 exhibition at the Akron Institute of Art, which is now the Akron Art Museum. Also from 1974 is this Michael Vesa drawing, and he's not quite well known in the area anymore, but I really liked his work. It's almost minimalism, but also conceptualism. A lot of his pieces had to do with how we inhabit space and the idea of construction of walls. So you can see in this photograph, he's building a fake wall for one of his installations. But I really enjoy the idea of how diverse geometric abstraction can be, and all the different types of meanings that artists are able to put into their abstractions. The piece is done in the same time period as op art and other movements. So the fact that it's so different is really intriguing. I ended up purchasing an actual giant stack of them at auction shortly after the housing crisis. So the prices were a little bit soft, and I'm very fortunate for that. Going into the bedroom, you'll notice first of the giant Phyllis Fanon folded paper construction. It's also a more recent purchase. And then I also have other geometric pieces by Kenneth Dingwall and Matthew Gallagher. Dingwall is from the 70s. Gallagher is actually a contemporary artist. But primarily, the showstopper of the room is the James Johnson. And the James Johnson, I always tell people, it's a piece that I shouldn't own because the value is actually out of my price range. But I managed to pick this up at auction because it was caked in dirt, there was mold and mildew, and there was also flaking paint. There's a large section that's actually fallen off. But I got it fairly inexpensively because of that, and was able to put some time and money into restoring it. But I also want to point out this Francis declined from probably the late 1800s or early 1900s, and it's a lot of fun to kind of mix eras of artwork like this. I think, though, with the expressive brushwork and watercolor, it really kind of plays well with the abstract expressionist pieces in the room. The Fanon, like I said, I purchased this directly from the artist. I saw it in her studio, and I really, really enjoyed how she was telling me that it was inspired by her trips to South America and the Mayan pyramids that she saw, that blocky construction. But I also really think it's connected to her earlier work, which was watercolor still lifes of flowers. And you can see how densely she packed those flowers in. And it kind of makes me remember and think about these folded objects that she creates, these geometric folded pieces that she then puts together. They're all tightly packed in. And the folds of the paper even make me think of the petals of flowers. So I like to think that there's like a connection and a growth from an earlier period to a later period. The watercolor is fairly large and also found at a thrift store. The Kenneth Dingwall, again, really shows the diversity in 1970s geometric abstraction. He's oftentimes considered a minimalist, but I don't know if I would say that, because his work is usually composed of all these really tiny, short lines of pencil or wax. And even though the piece looks like it's monochromatic, that there's no color to it, once you observe it and start actually looking at it, you can see that there's some red and pink that are coming out from beneath, underneath that initial white surface. Going into the dressing room, you'll first notice the more Epstein wood sculpture, but also I have John Pearson and Matthew Gallagher sculptures on the wall next to it. And I really like that acknowledges a student-teacher relationship. Gallagher studied under Pearson. But even in everyday things, I like to collect local artisans, like the Bunny Page spiked heart pendant. You also notice there's some other enamels and a George Kokar skull. But really, the entire room here, this is the first room we completed. The room is an extension of this Nevadomi painting. I really think that the room itself becomes part of the Nevadomi painting. And it's really a fascinating piece. We knew immediately that we wanted this in the dressing room, primarily because it was of a figure getting dressed and getting ready to go out. So it just makes perfect sense. But when we found the dressers at the restore down the street, we knew because we loved them because it's the same colors and also the great shape. But inside one of the drawers when we got them home was this really interesting white leather glove. So it just was like meant to be. So like you've got that white leather glove there and the white leather glove in the painting. So it's like it really pulls that painting into the real world for us. And I have that then paired with a Michael Gupkin vase. The other piece in the dressing room that I would like to talk about is the Alan Fenton. And I purchased this from auction, and it was actually listed as a lithograph. So pay attention to auction listings as well when you're starting to collect, because oftentimes things will get miscatalogued, even like by medium. So I bought this thinking it was a lithograph, and when I got it home, I saw these white dots that look like paint splatters. And I thought, well, maybe I can scrape them off or, see somehow, like, is there a way to remove them? So I took it out of the frame, and upon closer observation, I discovered that it actually was a painting, not a lithograph. So you can find some really unique pieces just by paying attention to the listing and like observing a little bit more. Look closely, because what someone might think is a print might be an actual painting. Fenton is really interesting, I think, because he was an abstract expressionist. He started in the 60s, but then he moved on to New York City, and he started getting into real estate and opening up the workspaces for artists. And he ended up moving back to Cleveland in the 80s and started making live workspaces in Cleveland. So he actually developed the Superior Lofts building. I do have another work of Fenton's in my collection. I'm not going to show it to you. It's actually too large to fit in the house, so it's currently residing in my garage. I actually discovered it in an old warehouse, and I didn't want to see it thrown away, so I saved it. But it too, like the Johnson, is caked in dirt, and it's got some oil staining, and it's also got some flaking paint. So I've talked to some conservators, and conservators will tell you what you need to know to take care of things yourself, like how far you can go. So they recommended getting a soft horsehair bristle brush to kind of start removing the dirt, and then also using makeup sponge remover, the little wedges, foam wedges, and you can kind of remove dirt that way too. So when I get most of the dirt removed, I will then investigate how to best restore the remaining painting. I'd like now to talk about more like how I find these things. How do I collect and make decisions? And primarily, a lot of artwork that I collect does come from thrift stores, much to the chagrin of a lot of artists. You can see sometimes you go in and you find things you know right away what they are, like the Susan Fiore in the upper corner and the Goethe Hacker in the bottom corner. I was very much aware of their works, and I can spot them, whenever I go someplace. If I see them, I recognize them. But there's other pieces that I find that I have no idea what they are. And because it's from a thrift store, I tend to just buy it. Like, the pieces are usually not that expensive, and it gives me a research project. Sometimes I will Google a name just to see if there's anything that kind of comes up right away, but a lot of times it really requires some digging. And that's how I came across this Glenn Morrisseau. I didn't know who it was, same with the Faith Wooten, completely unfamiliar with them. But then they, through some research, discovered that Glenn Morrisseau is actually an Ashtabula area abstract expressionist from that period. And then I also uncovered that Faith Wooten was very involved with the Bay Crafters, with Bay Arts. So there's a lot of things that are around in Cleveland art that a lot of people don't know, they're not aware of yet. So there's a lot of new discoveries that are yet to be made. And that's one of the things that really excites me about collecting art, and also really excites me about being an art historian, is uncovering these new stories, these new connections, and pulling all of this work together. I have also done work for trade. I ended up doing some work for Shirley Ellie Campbell. She asked me if I would help catalog her work, and I accepted. And when the end of the project came around, I had mentioned that I would be honored to have one of her paintings, and she asked me if I would accept one of her paintings for payment and let me select one. So I'm very fortunate to have this Shirley Campbell in my collection, and it is one of the cherished pieces. Likewise, I did some work for a gallery doing an exhibition and a catalog, and I saw this piece hanging in the gallery often and would always stop and appreciate it and comment about it. And I had a Clarence Carter print. It was one of the first pieces I purchased as a collector, but I never thought I would be able to have a work on paper, like a drawing or a painting. And so when the gallery owner offered this to me, I was really excited and thrilled that this was an option, because had I gotten a monetary compensation for those projects, I can guarantee you that it would not have gone to these pieces, it would have gone elsewhere. But fortunately, at that time, I was able to accept these for payment. I also find quite a bit of work online through eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and a variety of different auction websites. you can just start Googling estate sales, and just start looking through countless pictures and listings. And a lot of times things are not cataloged, so you really do have to look very closely at pictures. But on eBay, like I've been able to pick up quite a bit of pieces, like this Angelica Pozzo plate, the Phyllis Fannin print, as well as the Mary Spain paintings, pyramid paintings. But the Wayland Gregory lamp is actually a unique story, because I found that online at an auction website, and it wasn't listed, it wasn't cataloged. It was simply put up as a decorative lamp paired with another decorative lamp. And I commented about it to some of my colleagues, and when they said they weren't interested in it, I decided that I had to go for it. And fortunately I did, because now it's part of my Italian pottery collection. Another really great way to collect art is to go to estate sales. And these are two of my most cherished stories for estate sale finds. I happened to find the Michkowski listed at one of the estate sales, but unfortunately had to work that day. So I sent a couple of my good friends out to investigate for me. And they ended up calling me right away as soon as they got there and told me the price. And I was a little sticker shocked about it, just knowing what the auction values were. And so they were kind enough to purchase it for me and made arrangements that I could pay them back over the course of a summer. So this is now has a really wonderful story for me, and I really enjoy that aspect of having that piece. Another piece is the Todd Leach ceramic, which I ended up purchasing from the estate of David Ream, who I knew personally. So not only is it a way for me to own a work of art by an artist that I truly admire, but it's also a way to honor my memory of a friend and a person who actually collected my work as well. Those were really, really meaningful purchases for me. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about purchasing and collecting works that may not be perfect. I like to call them dented cans or damaged goods. And this Phyllis Sloan is a good example of that. And I already talked about an Alan Fenton, and you saw the James Johnson. One of the things I appreciate about damaged art is that most people don't care about damaged art and tend to just discard it or throw it away. A lot of times if it's a painting, it can be restored, or a sculpture, you can have things fixed. In the case of this print, like the Phyllis Sloan, I don't think there's much that can be done for this. I'm not a paper conservator and I haven't asked anybody, but it to me seems like it would not be worth putting the time and effort into restoring it. But it's still, even in its condition, able to be enjoyed for its aesthetic value, and also the fact that it is a rare piece. It's oftentimes difficult to find her prints on metallic paper. So this might be the only one that I come across. And it's also less expensive. People don't want to buy damaged art. So if you're not collecting specifically for the monetary value or the investment, like I don't much care for the investment value, having a damaged work of art really is a personal decision, and it's one that I enjoy because I feel like it adds a little bit to the story of the work. So to recap, I really want to encourage everyone to start collecting art if you aren't already. Think about the types of images you like, do a little bit of research, and be sure to look at everything. When you're out and about, look under books, look under boxes, keep your eyes peeled for anything that might look like it might be a work of art, because you really can find it anywhere. I do know of some stories of people who have found really wonderful works of art like out on the curb for trash day. There was one in particular a few years ago that I heard that someone found Julian Stanchek leaning up against a trash can. So you really have to pay attention to your surroundings at all times. and enjoy what you collect. Like really live with it, really enjoy it, experiment with it, like make your own narratives and figure out what the art means to you, and also think about what it might mean to other people. As you can see, I have collected a variety of different styles of art, but I feel like they still have similar connections. They might not all be connected, but through similar pieces and other artists' time periods, like there's still a thread that pulls it all together. Um, and I also wanted to mention that I have started a YouTube channel where I do unboxing art videos that is more about collecting art via the mail. So please follow me, subscribe to me at Context Fine Art on YouTube. And you can also learn more about my exhibition history and the work that I have done at contextfineart.com. And thank you very much. I think now is a good time to go to questions and answers.
Oh, there we go. So if you stop your screen share real quick, that way we'll just be able to look at you. Awesome. Hello, everyone. So if you have a question for Christopher and you'd like to ask it out loud, you can absolutely do so by raising your hand, and we'll be able to take a few of those. And then, or if you're more comfortable, you can type them in the Q&A function and we'll read them out loud there. So maybe pop over to the chat, see if we have any brave souls. We might have typers tonight. That is a-okay. All right. Well, while you decide if you want to take the plunge, I'm going to go ahead and read some from the Q&A. So, all right. So I'm going to actually scoop one up from. Oh, I think she moved it over. So first, we're going to actually take one from George Kokar. So he actually not only was featured in Christopher's collection, archived artist, and he's on the call. So, yay. And actually, George wanted to know if you know what happened to Vivian Abrams. And then he personally remembers her from the early 80s.
Wonderful. Actually, yes, I stay in touch with Vivian, and I've been talking to her quite a bit more recently. She asked me if I could help her develop a show for Cleveland, and right now I'm working with John Frean and Adam Tully at Maria Neal Art Project to bring a show of her recent sculptures to Cleveland from Hudson Valley is where she's living and working now. So that'll be coming up this October, and I'm really excited to share her work, reintroduce her to the Cleveland public. And yeah, she's actually a wonderful artist and really lovely. I love her work.
Then it looks like our next one is kind of a throwback to the dining room. It's from Charla, and it is, who is the artist who compliments Fiore in the dining room? Does that?
Yeah, opposite the wall, I featured the giant Xerox. It's pretty much an electrostatic print, but it's made up of several different sheets, and that is Gary Crawford Waltzer. When I first discovered her work, I knew her work is Gary Crawford, but then I discovered that she also goes by Gary Crawford Waltzer, and she's now still lives and works in Cleveland, but is primarily a photographer, doesn't use the Xerox anymore, as far as I know.
Transition from it. We got a lot of good questions today. Oh, here's an interesting one for any collector, which is from Leah Gilbert, which is, do you recommend having insurance for your pieces?
I talked to my insurance agent about that because I do have some pieces that are quite valuable at this point in time. But he assured me that as long as I had the pieces documented, that if anything happened to the house, the value of the pieces still fit under the house insurance. So it's something you might want to check with your home insurance agent, and then see if he or she recommends something extra.
Good call. It didn't even occur to me. I have a bunch behind me, and I'm just like, oh yeah, insurance. Professionally, obviously, we have a boatload of insurance, as we should as a professional museum and organization. But personally, so good. It looks like we also have a couple comments as well. Phyllis Fanning, who you featured, is also on the program, and she just said that thank you, Chris, and that she's honored. Interestingly enough, a lot of the artists you mentioned and showed in your collection, a lot of them are on the call today. So
Great.
so we also have, that being said, we also have another, let's see, one from Linda Adamy. Forgive me if the name is mispronounced. And it said, thank you for the informative, engaging discussion. Your deep knowledge and experience have clearly been an asset to building your collection. What are your views on collecting a new artist who has not yet established a reputation, but whose work you simply just like?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm trying to think of people that, like I started collecting Matthew Gallagher's work, I think before he had his first show at Edge. I don't even remember where I saw it, but I really enjoyed his work and decided that this is an artist that spoke to me. And then after learning that he had studied with John Pearson, I was like, oh, of course, that everything makes sense now. So yeah, I absolutely think that looking to collect young artists or artists that are just starting out, because they don't have to be young artists, I think that's a really good idea. It also encourages that artist. It shows to them that they have an audience and that their work speaks to people. So it's really important. I think it's really important.
Then we got, this is awesome. This is like a great collection of questions. This one makes me really smile, which is from Laura Dowler. And it says, do you have a white whale of collecting? That one piece that you feel like you're constantly chasing?
Yeah, so my favorite story about that, I have a couple, but my favorite one, I was working an auction at Rachel Davis, and she had up for sale a ceramic plate by Ken Dingwall. And I was absolutely fascinated by the idea that he even did ceramics. A couple had sold prior for like somewhere in between like $30 and $60 range, and I thought for sure, okay, I can manage this. This was before I had any of his paintings, so I started bidding on it. Rachel was taking a break, so she was working the console right next to me, and there was another auctioneer up at the time, and the bid just started getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and I'm like, okay, this is above what I can pay for it, but I'm gonna keep going. Like, I will max out a credit card for this ceramic plate. I don't care. And it just kept getting higher and higher. And so when it got to $850, I bid it all the way up to $850. I was just like, no, I can't do it. That's too much. That's just way too much. And the lot closed. I didn't get it. And I'm like sitting there in my seat, shaking out of nerves. Rachel just very calmly looks over to me and is like, do you need to take a break? And I'm like, oh, yes. So I just stood up slowly and walked away for a good 10-15 minutes so I could calm down and then come back. So that's one of them. The other that I really liked is recently on a auction website. It was just a random estate sale auction, and they had a Howard Kotler ceramic cat that was featured in one of the May shows, and it was piled in with all of this other knickknacks and junk. Like, it really was junk. And I thought for sure no one's going to recognize this cat in the middle of all of this junk. So I kept bidding on that one as well, but unfortunately, several other people recognized it and went way above what I was willing to pay for it. So yeah, there's several that have gotten away.
And just like hoping, praying, be like, maybe no one's gonna
right?
It, you know?
Right.
Doing it behind
You always want to be slightly smarter than the next bidder, right?
I think I would probably get, and actually it's a comment from Jenna Sloan, who's actually in the chat. Jenna is the daughter of Phyllis Sloan, and so she's attending, and she goes,
Hi, Jenna.
yeah, Jenna's amazing. She was just featured in our Artist Archive program where we toured Phyllis's studio. Thank you so much for that. And Jenna had a point. She's like, that's well known as auction fever, and Lord knows. Also, a quick note that Matthew Gallagher and Christopher Richards, aka Christopher Richards, will be exhibiting in Converge, which is our next show coming up, opening August 26th. 26th or 29th? My brain. I'm sure I can hear Kelly yelling in my head. I think it's the 26th. And so, yes, that's on our website right now. Amazing show. See Christopher's work, not just the work he collects. Amazing. So I think we have time for just one or two more, just to try to get through them. So this is from Sean Wheeler. Do you do many studio visits of current local artists? And if so, is there anyone you're particularly interested in?
Oh, there's way too many artists that I'm particularly interested in. I actually have a really long list of wants, but I do occasionally do studio visits. Primarily, they're when I'm working on a project, though, so I haven't just on a whim went and done a studio visit just to see a studio. But I do enjoy doing that, and I'm hoping to do more of that just as a friendly visit rather than for work.
I always get when I'm in a studio, though, I want to like buy stuff, and then I'm like, oh wait, I work for an art nonprofit. Oh no, money.
Yeah.
And then when you have personal connections too, I want to support more. So.
Right.
Okay, let's buzz through a couple more. Real quick from Mitzi, just a quick comment that Shirley Campbell, for your picture, she often hosted a pool party in the summer, which by the way is legendary for pool parties, where I've been told. That piece looked like what was behind her pool in the garage. She said she later lived and gave her house to two of them to her daughter. So her pool, which was behind the garage, which she later lived and gave the house to her daughter. So she just, I believe the quote is that Mitzi had the fortune of being good friends with Shirley. Let's see, final stretch. Any tips on how to safely mount work that's not in a conventional frame?
Oh, so I like to use when I'm matting pieces myself. Sometimes I'll use hinge tape, but a lot of times I'm too lazy. So I use photo corners and mount the photo corners to the backing board. But non-conventional frames, if it doesn't have a frame, if it's just matte and glass, they have little L pins, so you can put little L pins in the wall in four corners. Or they also make these little hooks, like the Mary Spain I have that I featured is on these little hooks, and they kind of tie together in the back. So the piece isn't framed, but it's got the hanging hardware in the back, even though these got little hooks that come around the corners.
Use them for plate, right? For plate display.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but for larger works of art. Yeah, you can find that at most hobby stores and craft stores.
All right, final ones. I think we can get through them all if we go quick. One was that this is from James Leslie, who's an amazing regional artist as well as ceramicist. And there's a piece by Leslie right behind me. Tiny of the Webs. Are you looking beyond Cleveland regional artists to collect?
Typically, no. But I do have a few pieces that are not regional artists. One of my favorites is by Frank Gallo, and you saw it in the living room when you first came in. It was the female figure standing in front of the Vivian Abrams. I could probably go grab it real quick and pull it over.
We're kind of like buzzing the last ones, but
yeah. But what interested me in his work is also his use of sexuality, and then also the idea that he was using polymers for his sculptures. So it goes back again to my interest in plastics. And I absolutely love his work. I think it's fascinating. So a little bit, but not too much out of the Cleveland area.
I like it that it's hyper local. I love that. And connections to everyone. Final question, and then we're going to kick it back to Mindy to end to the program. Thank you everyone for sticking around a little later. I figured we'd try to get through them and appreciate it. And this is from Linda. Again, forget the pronunciation on this, but Adamy. When dealing directly with the artists, do you ever try to negotiate the price? Ooh.
No, I let them tell me what the price is, and then if it's out of my range, I don't ask anymore. I want to support the artists. I want to purchase a piece at the price that they're comfortable with. It has nothing to do with what I can afford or not afford. That's whether I buy it or not. But their price is their price. Yeah.
I love that. It shows respect, and artists priced so low, especially regionally, it just to respect. Well, Christopher, on my end, thank you so much for doing this program. It is so exciting. I want to go rearrange my whole art. I have art is not collected in the groups yet. So just thank you. And with that, it's just been a pleasure. And I will throw it back to Mindy Cowsley for final words and to close our program out.
Thanks, Christopher. Thank you, Megan. Great presentation, Christopher. Very professional. I love the colors in your house. We're going to have to get together because I have walls that are very similar colors. So, but that makes sense to me because I think we kind of share an aesthetic in some of our collecting. There was a mention in the chat that you might not have seen that Ken Nevedomi teamed up with Richard Schneider when they both taught at CSU to produce those ceramic plates that you were talking about. So.
Oh, wonderful. I was wondering how he did that too, because I was like, I didn't think he did any ceramics, but that makes a lot of sense.
So keep an eye on Richard Schneider's work as it comes up at auction too. Maybe the Ken Nevedomi plate again.
I actually have a Richard Schneider plate that I found for $1 at the Painesville Antique Co-op. And it's really fun, but primarily of the Schneiders, the bulk of the work is from Patty Schneider that's in my collection. So yeah.
Cool. So I just, I want to thank everyone for coming. I am going to share my screen for just a final moment. I just want to reiterate, please become involved in the archives, join a committee, make a donation, visit the gallery space. There's another plug for the show that's up right now and the show that's opening. And as Megan said, Christopher is an artist in his own right, and he will be showing work at the LGBT Center as part of Converge. So thanks everybody for coming again tonight. Don't forget to take the survey. It's going to pop up as soon as we end. And I just want to end by saying, have a great night, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at the archives. Thanks so much for being on. Christopher, great presentation. Loved it. Thank you. Good night, everybody.